Tonight's Modern Men is powered by the Hero Initiative. Are you interested in becoming a hero? Go to heroinitiative.org to see how you can be a hero to comic creators in need. Hey, what's going on, guys? We're back once again. Modern Men, episode 62 already? Jeez. Well, with me, as always, of course, I'm Carson, but here's ComicManAndy. Every single episode he's been here. Andy, how you doing, man?
I'm doing well, man. And this beard's getting savage. The only thing more savage than this beard is our lack of DruManchu tonight.
Yeah, I was getting ready to introduce him, but I have no idea where Drew's at, so maybe he'll join us. We'll see. I know it's windy here, so maybe his power went out over and wherever he's from. Don't want to spoil it. Don't want to break kayfabe, I guess. But Drew, wake up! So there you go. Hopefully Drew's out there somewhere. But for this week's episode, you guys voted, and we read Savage Dragon, the original miniseries. What better way to end 2020 than by going back to the 90s for no reason whatsoever? And we're going to be recapping the best of Modern Men for 2020. We're going to talk about some of our favorite reads, some of our favorite topics, maybe a dubious honor or two. But honestly, I think, with allowing, getting rid of the randomizer and allowing our fans of the show to vote has really help the quality of the read stay very consistent, in my opinion.
I'd agree with that, actually. I really would. There seems to be just this trend of continuously upward scaling, Yeah,
it's when we reintroduce the randomizer at complete random is where we get the questionable reads, or the ones that usually are like 8s and 9s across the board. But we'll talk a little bit about that later. But first, I want to get into this interesting topic of the Savage Dragon. Obviously, usually if you talk about the Savage Dragon miniseries, you kind of got to go back and realize, what time were we in when this came out? So it was the early to mid-90s. There was a big shakeup in the world of comic books where the Image founders, they left Marvel. They didn't like the benefits they were getting. They didn't like that they didn't have full control of the characters they were creating, and sure, a bevy of other reasons. So they went and they formed Image. And one of those creators, of course, was Eric Larsen. And Eric Larsen had this character in his back pocket since he was a kid named the Savage Dragon. He's been drawing this guy on pieces of printer paper and all that stuff, making the comics while he was a kid. And he did get it published a few times throughout the 80s, but we never saw the full version of it up until the Savage Dragon miniseries. And I think, 1992, I think this was published. It could be wrong. Could have been 93, 94. Apparently, Eric Larsen was working on getting married at the time, and that had a lot of effect on the release schedule of his Image title, which early Image, they're known for their very rough release schedules early on. So, Andy, I want to get into some initial thoughts here. What did you think when you first opened up Savage Dragon? Well, first off, let me even ask this. There were several different versions of this on Comixology for us to read. Which version did you end up picking to read?
Oh, let me look at the title again. Once again, Comixology does an amazing job kind of clouding what is our jumping off point or who has what. There's a lot of collected editions, so it's tough to find. This was Savage Dragon. Oh, it doesn't even say it on the cover.
Yeah, I think this one was called Baptism by Fire is what I read.
Yeah.
That might have been what you read too. It's got a white cover background. He's dual-wielding machine guns.
Yep, and actually 1993. I can find you the year in there, but I can't find you the title, apparently.
Gotcha.
Why you want to talk about getting transported back to 1993, man? I remember seeing this on the shelves and a lot of other Savage Dragon stuff growing up as a kid, and it just never really caught my attention. I'm not sure why. Wish I would have had a little more history with this. Kind of a unique concept, and I really like the beginning of the opening where Eric Larsen talks about making comic books as a kid and folding up those papers and stapling them and sometimes making them 100 pages long. And he had many different iterations of this character. And I like how he talks about how he pulls some from some Marvel stuff and some, I think even DC a little bit too. Yeah, like the Flash Mercury version was leaner, and he talks about some of this stuff, and it's amazing to see how the current stuff that was happening or what he was reading and was into was inspiration for what he was creating. And here we are, eventually got to the Savage Dragon that we know.
Yeah, so I read the one that's entitled Baptism of Fire on Comixology, and I didn't realize it until I read it, because I also went and watched Cartoonist Kayfabe's recap of Savage Dragons issue 1 through 3, just to, get a couple extra facts that I may have missed reading this, and I didn't realize it because they do a page-by-page recap of it in the individual comics. And what I noticed right off the bat is after I read the trade and watched their recap of it, the trade is actually collected differently than the individual issues. So they're in the original issues, there's a couple flashbacks here and there where it shows, how he gets into the police force and stuff, and it'll flash to an action sequence. The trade that I read, and I think you read as well, has everything presented in a chronological order, which means there are some pages that are from different issues, but it's kind of portrayed in issue 1, if that makes any sense. Like, I believe the first opening page of issue 1, we don't even get to until page 27 of this trade. So that really caused this just breakneck pacing and speed of the story, in my opinion, and made for some very inconsistent art. Even though Eric Larsen does all the art across the board pretty much, there's still, like, you could tell the pages he had to work on faster than the pages he did, took more time, obviously, when reading in this format, especially when you get to that issue 27 or page 27, which was the opening splash page for issue 1. It looks beautiful. It's presented very well. But then, like, the 20 pages before that, you could tell were done for, like, a different project. And I don't think he put as much time and love into said project because it almost looks completely like it was a different artist. So I don't know if you had that same experience or not, but right off the bat, for me, that was pretty jarring.
I noticed the inconsistencies, but I didn't pick up on the details of those inconsistencies. Just, I'm like, okay, it just felt like kind of a not paced very well 90s book, and you could see some of the rushing, but that's kind of par for the course with a lot of 90s image reads. Like, they had a plan, they went to execute it. Hey, wait, let's pull these guys out of our back pockets that we've been dreaming out for these years. Oh, we better hurry up. And there was a lot of rushing going on in the early days.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess we can get into the story a little bit here, because like I said, I think it was only like 3 to 5 issues, which is also another inconsistency that I looked up, because I think Comixology's description said this was issues 1 through 4 of the miniseries. I thought there were only 3 issues. And then I went to Wikipedia. It said it was like 0 through 5. So I'm just like, hold the fuck, like, what does this cover? And then another one said there was like unpublished pages published here for the first time. So I'm just like, you know what? I'm just going to accept this for what it is. And then I'm not going to read every version of it, obviously, and compare and contrast. So Baptism by Fire, that's the one I'm sticking with, and that's what I'm going to review, basically. So, like I said, because of the difference in presentation, and it's something, I guess he watched the Godfather saga on HBO or something, which there's a version of Godfather 1 and 2 out there where they present it chronologically. So, like, the scenes from Godfather 2 go super quick, because Godfather 2, obviously, you have the Vito Corleone storyline, and then you have Michael's storyline, which is more current, obviously. That's the true sequel to the first Godfather. And then the first Godfather has none of those gimmicks. It's just a straight story that's like 3 hours start to finish. So by the time you watch Godfather 1 in that, it feels like it's so slow and presented. It shakes up the presentation kind of negatively. And you don't really get that vision of what Godfather 2 should have been if you don't watch it that way. So I kind of feel that I know Godfather and Savage Dragon, two completely different things, obviously, but I kind of feel like here that it did affect the presentation a little bit, because right at the gate, like, you just see like his origin story kind of, and then him getting the police force and all this other stuff. Like, it happens in like the first 20 pages where you see him wake up in the hospital. He has no memory of who he is. He can remember who's the president, what was on TV the night before, but he has no facts about himself. And then he gets out of the hospital. He's propositioned by this guy. I think his name's Frank. He's the main police officer buddy he has. He's like, hey, you want to work for my cousin or brother or whatever? And I'm sorry I don't remember this because it took place so fast. He's like, hey, you want to go work for my relative who works in this warehouse? And he goes there and chases off some baddies. The baddies get mad. They want to blow the place up because they fought him. They blow the place up on the next panel. They kill the guy. And Savage Dragon goes back and is like, hey, they killed your buddy. I'm joining the police force now. You see him on the police force. He's already fighting other bad guys. And then you finally get to that opening splash panel of issue 1. Like I said, it's just breakneck speed here. So how did you experience this pacing, Andy?
This felt like the manifesto of like a high school kid doing his first ever what do I want to see on the pages kind of deal. Literally breakneck speed. And I'm like, not accustomed to that sort of pacing in a book that was essentially kind of adding up to be like a 90s action flick on paper.
Absolutely. Yeah. I did get my vibes I got from this were obviously like your Bruce Willis Die Hard style combined with like Arnold Schwarzenegger. Yeah. He's unkillable. He can absorb bullets somehow, even though he's not even getting shot. And then you mix in a little bit of trauma action with Toxic Avenger here. And one of my favorite elements of all of this, he's just like big, ugly green dude, but yet in like 2 issues, he forms 4 love interests somehow, which that's what had me laughing the most. And then he had like the female cop buddy that RoboCop had, so you can sprinkle some RoboCop in there too. But yeah, like it's just hilarious to me. Like every other woman he meets has just like big boobs, like, hey, thanks for saving me. You want to go grab a drink? He's like, oh, I'm on official police business. Maybe later.
That's my beeper going off.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the beeper.
I'm glad you brought up the RoboCop reference actually, because I was feeling a little Lethal Weapon-esque, if you will.
Yeah.
That shooting scene in the shooting gallery with the other police officers. It's kind of a mix of Lethal Weapon and a little bit of RoboCop there. It was kind of funny.
Absolutely. So,
but yeah, so you can see my thought process as far as like a manifesto of like a high school kid putting amnesia. You wake up super powerful. You're the biggest badass ever, and you stick out in the crowd, and nobody can take you down. And you get all the hot babes, and you get all the cool machine guns, and it's just breakneck speed like action. It's what it feels like.
And then for me, like I guess we kind of have to address this too. It's just super weird to find this type of subject matter in Savage Dragon, but he obviously addresses issues with racism and police. And I don't know if it was published in the original materials or just put in the newer trade in the 2010s. I think this one was published, but it was just, I mean, it's crazy. He wrote this stuff in the 90s and it's still as problematic now as it ever was before. But I guess you kind of got to go back to the 90s and think, the time that the Rodney King incident happened. And I guess Eric Larsen drew a few pages relating to those issues. So did you get that in your volume as well?
Yeah, like I said, being transported back to the early 90s a fair bit here with an amount of racism that they're attempting to challenge and some sexism a little bit as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
And what was it? I don't remember when the Rodney King, what year it was, but they draw from that, and the racism in the police force kind of hits home still.
Yeah, and right out the gate, like I didn't know how long this one police character was going to last. Obviously, he didn't last long, but there was one bigot cop, and that's the term that even the Dragon used here. And he immediately basically just like takes his hand and just grabs his junk and raises him through a roof, basically. So that's pretty much all we get from that character, thank goodness. But it's just so weird in this like 90s heavy action breakneck pace speed book we get this subject matter. It kind of hit me out of left field, but I guess it definitely made the book more interesting to me overall. Like I never thought I'd open an early 90s Image title and see something like that.
Yeah, that's a good point. I don't really know how to drum that up more than it's there, and they utilize it. And I was kind of taken aback by some phrasing and terminology that I was surprised to see in the book that was actual racist terminology. And I was like, well, that's where they were at in the 90s, actually.
Yeah. I was just like I said, shocking to say the least, but in the grand scheme of things, they go right back to action real quick. Like it seems like every other panel, they're like, or every other page, they're like, hey, there's an incident going on here. We should probably check it out. And then he just goes in like 2 machine guns blazing, getting his like police uniform shot up in 1 page. And yeah, like it's pretty crazy. Then I guess they introduce a lot of characters in the first issue alone that they use in the full run. So are there any other like extra characters that you wanted to see more of? Obviously they spent no time on these characters, but at least you saw them in a panel or two and got them introduced. So was there a character besides Dragon that stuck out to you?
Not really, not at the moment. I mean, we see some things transpire, and I think the second issue of one of the characters that I was interested in following a little more, or trying to see where it went. But these are just glimpses, really, into some of these characters. They're literally just the first introductions, and there's not a lot of meat on the bones, so to speak, to really figure out who's interesting or who I really want to follow. They're centralized. They're focused on Savage Dragon here for the most part.
Yeah, I would say the other one, at least I don't like the character, but he made me laugh pretty good. I think it's this character named Cyber Data, who has like the American flag mask and then the cod piece that matches, and he can apparently shoot lasers from his penis somehow. Like I'm pretty sure there's a panel later that's he shoots Savage Dragon in the face with a dick laser, basically. And that's the one of like, okay, now we're back in the 90s. All right, this is just ridiculous. But his other main love interest here in issue 2 is Debbie, his next door neighbor, who's basically wearing Daisy Dukes and a red tank top. And like I said, I think that's the one he kind of sticks with. We'll get into more on her in just a bit, but yeah, you got to fight more 90s gimmicks, and he just gets his shirt ripped off again. And the Cyber Data guy, they actually kind of beat each other up, and then somehow he gets taken off. And then once again, breakneck like pace speed, he gets like critically injured, goes to the hospital, gets out of the hospital, fighting in a gown, and then beats up more bad guys while he's in his gown.
At night, he's in there for 9 days, and he's awoken by another bad guy somehow at the hospital trying to take him out.
Yeah, and then he's confronted by the girl he saved earlier, Amanda Mills, and she wants to, like, within 2 pages, he has 2 more love interests. There's this girl, Amanda, who he saved from this, like, drug ring earlier, and then there's this other nurse who, like, once the other girl leaves, the nurse comes in and, like, hugs him. It's like, it's going to be okay. I'm just like, oh, my God. Like, it never ends. But eventually he ends up with the next door neighbor. Oh, we forgot about Youngblood. We haven't covered Youngblood yet.
Yeah, so Youngblood was
for no reason. We get Bedrock from Youngblood. He shows up, and he just starts a fight with them for basically no reason. And you find out later, he's like, yeah, I wanted to see if you were worthy of joining Youngblood. And he's like, no, please, God, no, don't put me in Youngblood. He actually gets him arrested. But in the middle of all this, in the trade, there's actually a page here of Spawn, which I'm pretty sure this was published in Spawn.
Yep. So that's my favorite part of this read, actually, is they go back and draw from Spawn.
Yeah.
This is the point when literally Spawn becomes Spawn in the alleyway, and he grabs the coat and the hat, and he's trying to he's trying to find his way out of the alley and hide in plain sight, and he thinks 2 kids spot him right away, right?
Yes, exactly.
And
so
they actually spot Savage Dragon on the TVs inside the sales window, and they go racing past him. That was my favorite part of the book, actually.
It wasn't even from this book. I'm pretty sure that was McFarlane art and Spawn. They just threw it in for continuity purposes, I guess. So, because I just read Spawn with my buddy Mike on Comics of the Atom. I'm like, that page looks really familiar. And then, yeah, I'm pretty sure it's actually just yanked right out of Spawn. It wasn't published in Savage Dragon, but yeah, he eventually beats Bedrock. Then he goes back to his house or his apartment, and that's where his neighbor's at. And that's when we get this like really strange sequence of, and I say strange because of the how it ends basically. So he meets the neighbor, they just hook up, they sleep together. You see him the next morning, he's shaving. She says you could grow a mustache, and then there's some, ass tapping here, figuratively and literally. And the weirdest line to me, and I don't know if you caught on to this, Andy, she's just like being noisy or something. Oh yeah, he's like, I can't believe you read GQ. And then he's just like, why don't you go watch some TV? I think there's some cartoons on. Like, how old is this girl? Like, have you ever told anyone you slept with, like, hey, I'm getting ready to go do my real life job. Go watch some cartoons, kid. That is screwed up.
Well, that was part of the creepy part when we were first introduced to this character. She couldn't go back into her apartment because of her mom. Something was going on, and her mom's in the apartment. And the second time we meet her, right before they sleep together, she's locked out of the apartment and doesn't want to address the situation. So she begs him to stay on his couch for a night, and after a couple of minutes, he gives in. And then we go right into a love scene, and I'm like, that really? But still, yeah, that was really, really weird. He's like, why don't you try to watch some TV or something? I think there's some cartoons on. She says, sorry. And as she's leaving the room, she says, poop.
Yeah. So between all of the dialogue hints, you kind of get the feeling that this character is probably not 18. So I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. That was a weird one.
Well, they took care of that problem really quick.
Yeah, they took care of that problem really quick because at the pace, like at this point in the book, I was like, what, are we going to see their wedding on the next page? I'm going to turn the page and see a wedding. And we got the exact opposite of that. The door rings, she opens the door, and she gets headshotted. And the guy who shot her kills himself. And then there's a funeral.
But why? But why? I mean, off her, okay, you're adding to his strife, so to speak, and some character development there for him and whatnot. But then the shooter just drops himself right there. Like, wait, but why? And then they go right into the funeral scene, and it's her mom's pounding on him, crying, and then we go right. This is 90s montage, 90s action flick montage, like panel for panel right here. You go right from the love scene to the death scene to the cemetery to the bar where he's slumming there drinking whiskey, and that next page he's back to fighting again.
I feel like this was one really drawn out way just to give him an excuse to draw a mustache. Just so she can drop that one line. You'd look good in a mustache. Then she gets shot. Funeral happens. He needs to grow that mustache in tribute of his girl, and that's pretty much how the book ends. He has a mustache, and he doesn't have the lights turned on.
So some of these pages must have been inserted as here as well.
Yeah, I think this other one was from like some sort of crossover, like where the Next Men come in. That's not even in the mini series, I'm pretty sure.
Okay, that explains a little bit. That explains some of the confusion I was having with where this was going.
Yeah, which I think that's supposed to be the Jack Kirby's Next Men tribute or something. I'm not sure, but that is definitely a swipe of something else.
But now with this mustache, he's kind of gotten like he has like an Italian flair to him. Like, I will say this, the art gets better and better.
Yeah, I definitely agree.
Like he either gets more comfortable with drawing at a faster speed, or just has a better understanding and realization of what he wants his character to look like. Because then you get to the end here, and there's a lot more detail to be had, actually.
Yeah, and then so basically, I think that's where the miniseries ends, and then like there's a big long delay, and then you get the ongoing series that's still going to this day. Which the people who have read it seem to actually really enjoy it, but that's an endeavor.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't Savage Dragon hit longest ongoing series before Spawn?
I think so, but eventually the delays just added up. But I mean, it's all Eric Larsen knows, so you could say good job, Spawn, but that wasn't all drawn by Todd McFarlane and written by Todd McFarlane, obviously. So I think it was like that, and Dave Sims, Cerberus, basically, or your longest running ones probably at this point. Which they'll go decades between issues on that one. So who knows, how you want to count that. But yeah, I mean, I'm definitely glad we got a chance to read it, though. It is a phenomenal time capsule, to say the least, of 1993, 1994. So yeah, I guess we can go into some final thoughts and scores here. So Andy, as usual, well, there's only the two of us. You can go first.
I'm glad we had an opportunity to read this. I'm glad the chat voted this one up. Like you said, it was a nice little time capsule back into the 90s. It was interesting to see where they were at and the ideas that they came up with. And I like the letters at the beginning where Eric Larsen talks about how he developed this character over a long period of time. In the end, it was a fun ride. I'll give it an 8.0.
Okay.
It definitely has lots of holes and lots of challenges with pacing and some other stuff, but it was a fun ride nonetheless. So I'll give it an 8.
Yeah, I will say this. I definitely give Eric Larsen credit. He definitely jammed a lot into one mini series. Like a lot, but
very quickly.
Yeah, and it definitely represented that like late 80s, early 90s like action movie culture that was going on. Like it fit in perfectly in that era. So, but I'm trying to read it back today, and just the fact, I mean, I guess I'm just rating it based on this trade. And like I said, it was very inconsistent the way they put it together. And I guess if anyone's watching this and they have a better recommendation on how to read it, I guess besides going and finding the 3 or 4 original minis, which I probably have most of them behind me in my collection somewhere, I guess let me know. But other than that, I think I'm going to go ahead and give this a 7.5. Solid read. Definitely a lot of spine ticks on that spine, though. You can't not say that. Maybe 7.5 gold label. I definitely appreciated the fact that we got to read this, though. It was just a lot of fun. Really quick read. I probably finished this up in about 30 minutes total. But yeah, like I said, a lot of action. It was very quick and easy to just get through those action panels. Or you could just slow down and really appreciate Eric Larsen's art. Because I remember reading some of the Spider-Man stuff, but I think especially like maybe that last issue for me, this is some of his best work. He definitely poured his heart and soul into this character, and I think everybody could agree with that. So that was our review of Savage Dragon. Now I think it's time to take a look back at the year of 2020 and modern men. So I didn't realize this, Andy. We actually started 2020 by reading Justice League of Tornado's Path. It's a shame Drew's not here because I know it was one of his favorite reads. I know it was one of mine, but I guess, like, what did you think when we went and, like, actually gained access to the community poll and got a chance to drop the randomizer? Do you want to see the randomizer come back, or do you like the polling better?
I like the randomizer for the rare occasion when you're just trying to have fun with some of the other viewers and everybody. And then we should do like a once a quarter, once every so often, do a randomizer of all the reads that people continue to not vote for or don't want. And just like, we got the wild cards, sure. But the ones that just don't end up wild card worthy and everything else, maybe do a randomizer one of these days. But being able to gain access to that community poll and that community tab was a big deal. Was a really big deal for a lot more interaction. Then everybody joining the Comic Core Discord is huge for coming up with other ideas and thought processes for some of the titles. Because at the end of the day, when you've got 2 or 3 people, you've got ideas, but at some point, some fresh ideas are also really helpful.
Absolutely.
That community tab adds an element of people voting where there's some competition, and it's fun to see some of these get right down to the buzzer.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I was, I guess we can talk about it now. I was kind of surprised that Captain America by Ed Brubaker pulled out the victory last week, which that's what we'll be reading next week now. But for a while, like Iron Fist was in the lead last week, and I was really shocked. And then all the Brubaker fans came in and like, nope, you're not reading Iron Fist, even though Brubaker did that one too. And I just remembered that. But for some reason, all of a sudden, the tides really turned toward Cap. So it's always it just interests me, and even like this poll for this episode, I was really shocked that like a Wildcats didn't win. And there were Savage Dragon fans out there that wanted to see us talk about it. At least they didn't vote for Youngblood, I guess, because I don't think I could have did that one. Sorry,
Agreed.
people who voted for Youngblood. I know there were fans out there, but yeah, we started with episode, I think it was 13, where we talked about the 2020 preview show, which who knew how great 2020 was going to be. And then we reviewed Justice League of Tornado's Path. But Andy, did you have a particular favorite read you finally got a chance to read this year as a part of Modern Men that, was just your favorite read, regardless of how good the review or episode was?
Gideon Falls. That I've read several times, but that is my hands down my favorite read that we've done this year. Because of the fact that we were able to do that as a group, and the other people in the chat that hadn't finished it or hadn't reviewed it yet, we really got to share in that love for that story. Because this Gideon Falls came out end of 18. So it ran through 19 and it ran through 20, and it just saw its last issue and just wrapped up. But I think that was the episode, and that was the read I was most excited for when we did that one.
Yeah, I actually have the exact same answer to that question, because I never got a chance to really sit and read Gideon Falls. And I kept telling myself it was one thing I definitely wanted to read. And then when it actually got picked for us to read, you're just like, hey, you can read the first trade, but you're probably not going to be hooked into it. You need to keep reading as far as you can. And I did. And I think that was, one of our best discoveries in terms of a really good read that, people talk about it in the community we're in here, but I feel like not a lot of people talk about the story as a whole.
Agreed. And Gideon Falls is one of those reads that's paced so well and delivered masterfully, in my opinion, that you can sit and read 3 trades without taking an entire weekend, which gives you an opportunity to go back, reread
Absolutely.
it again. And I find myself seeing more and more details that I missed every time I read that. And it's not delivering a brand new story every time. It's not changing anything, but it's adding layers to it and making me more and more excited to go through and reread every time I do it.
Yeah, so I know when that comes out in hardcover and they do those nice Image Deluxe ones, I'll be first on board to get that thing. Like I'm definitely looking forward to rereading that at some point. But that was our favorite read that we kind of discovered. I guess, was there a dubious honor? Just one, it felt like a chore getting through, and by the end of it, you just didn't feel good about the book. Like, what was like the worst read we had to do this year?
I didn't even stop to think about that, honestly. I'll come back to me after you do yours.
So I had a few, like the one that keeps coming up universally between the 3 of us, I think, is Reaver. And Reaver, I don't think it was a bad book. I think it was just bland and mundane. I really don't mean to crap all over it, but I feel like between the 3 of us, there wasn't one of us who backs up that book. And I think that's what really killed I think that was a randomizer, if I remember right. And I think that's really what was the death knell of the randomizer completely. It's like, we don't need any more Reavers on here. The other one for me was probably I Hate Fairyland, just because I'm not a big Scotty Young guy. I know there's a lot of big Scotty Young fans out there, and that's the one that, like, they voted for I Hate Fairyland over the other reads we had. I don't remember what the other reads were on the poll, but I thought they were all better than I Hate Fairyland. And those rabid Scotty Young fans came in like, no, you're going to actually have to read this. And so I didn't mind the story. I'm just not a big fan of that art style. I know there's a lot of people who love it. When I go to cons, when they come back and Scotty Young's there, he'll have lines around the block. But yeah, that one just didn't do a lot for me.
Yeah, I wasn't quite at the same level with Fairyland as you were, but I'll take your Reaver and agree with you, and I'll add to the Star Wars Dark Empire.
I knew that was coming up.
Because I love me some Star Wars, but that was like chewing on a chunk of rawhide that just wouldn't break down and wouldn't go away. That was probably the read I struggled with the most.
Now, I feel like Drew, if he was here, he'd have the same answer. I think he only gave that one like a 4 out of 10 or something like that, if I remember right. Like, he hated it. I'm just like, dude, it's like the first Star Wars comic not published by Marvel. I mean, I tried to even defend it, but after a while, I knew I just needed to give up. And The other one that he hated was 100 Bullets, which is also one of my favorite episodes, because John's Comics with Kid joined us because he knew that Drew was going to crap all over it. And John loves that story. He loves the art. And Drew, I don't know what he has against like Eduardo Rizzo and Brian Azzarello, but he hated that book. And John just loved it. And if you want to see just good banter between, two Comic Corps members, go back and watch the 100 Bullets review. It still cracks me up when I watch it from time to time, seeing those two just bicker back and forth about how good or how bad this book was. I think me and you were on that panel, but we barely got a word in.
That is correct.
Other than that, I think most of our reads were pretty solid. I don't know if we really had another dud in the bunch. I'm kind of looking one more time just to make sure. But I think for the most part, everything else we read was classics or 9.0s or higher. So I guess with that being said, did you have a favorite actual review we did where it was just fun to sit and talk about the book, or we had good guests on that, you would recommend to somebody if you were going to show someone Modern Men for the first time?
Oh, dude, I got a number of them actually. And going back near the beginning of the year, Walking Dead and being able to relive Walking Dead in the trade format with you guys was excellent. Daredevil Born Again, episode 17. That was phenomenal. I had never experienced that read before, and being able to experience that with you guys and the viewers was great. The Watchmen special, I had a ton of fun on, episode 19. Right up there, higher on the list, getting higher here. Episode 46, the TMNT IDW Volume 1.
That's right, yeah.
Which actually spawned so much interest from my end of it that you and I have started to do that whole series, reviewing that whole series on your channel.
Yep, that's Turtle Talk Tuesdays. Coming back in January, stronger than ever.
Yep, I can't wait for that, which is going to blend into some Last Ronin discussion as well.
Absolutely.
And then I found a lot more appreciation for a character that I've written off for most of my life, and that was Batman. Episodes 29 and 28, Dark Knight Returns and Killing Joke. Excuse me. And Batman Court of Owls, episode 39. I'm not considering myself a massive Batman fan by any means, but we got something to say about that a little later. I'm enjoying a lot of these Batman reads that we see. You guys and the everybody in the chat, everybody watching, and you guys, you and Drew, are not steering us wrong when it comes to Batman reads at all by any means.
Yeah, I think there's a reason why, Batman is overexposed and he's on every other DC book now, is because of some of these classic reads, and we've had a lot of fun revisiting those, and those are going to be some of my picks too, where we got to do the back-to-back Batman episodes with Dark Knight Returns and The Killing Joke, of course. So those were both really awesome. One of my recommended episodes that I had a lot of fun with was episode 22. We reviewed Magic Order, which was a solid read, but I think that's where we really kicked the movie era into high gear. Is the movie era part 2. Part 1 was 2019, so I won't talk too much about that one. But that's the one where me and Drew had our great debate on Green Lantern. So he actually clipped it separately on the playlist if you guys want to go check that out. But I think that was one of our better episodes just because, we really ripped into some bad movies there. And that's where you get into some of those, just bland mid-2000s comic book movies. Like we probably talked about Fantastic Four. Green Lantern's the one that definitely came to mind. And I don't know if we quite got the Man of Steel until the next episode, but once we got into some of those DC ones, I mean, you really got to see me and Drew tear those movies up, and it was a lot of fun. And then for me, the other good ones, I think that one of our better ones was still the Watchmen special.
Yeah.
Just because we had the Great Legend show on with us, and he's a big Watchmen guy, and this guy liked it so much he came back for Crisis on Infinite Earths episode 50. Howler Mouse was watching it in the live chat for that one, so he liked our review of Watchmen. When we talked about doing Crisis, he wanted in on that one, so that was probably my favorite series of episodes we did. Obviously, no one else's favorites but mine, but the Crisis trilogy, because at the very least, at the end of that episode, I did use my wild card on that one, and we got this infamous screen cap at the end, or get Andy where Andy has now been told he has to read 3 DC crises in a row, and Andy was probably not thrilled with it. That just kills me every time. So I would say episode 50 might be my favorite, because it's my favorite read too, of just Crisis on Infinite Earths, going into Flashpoint, going into Infinite Crisis, just a good trilogy of episodes. And then, of course, we reviewed Why the Last Man, my other favorite read post 2000, of course. I know that was a pretty big one for you too, Andy.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. Brian K. Vaughan, early Brian K. Vaughan, not super early. And also around that time, I was super excited because I scored all the hardcover books for like $50.
Oh, that's right. You did.
In almost near new condition. Probably read once, put on the shelf, and somebody said they were done with them. To grab all of those hardcover books and have that series from start to finish for $50 is phenomenal.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, I think that's some of the best of 2020 for sure. So I'll try to remember to link the playlist down below, but definitely go to the Comic Core main channel. Just go to playlist. That's usually about the only one that's updated on the channel anyway. So check that out. So I guess my last question before we kind of slowly start to sign off and go into what we're reading next here. And then we'll cover this in a couple weeks as well, but I do want to touch upon some quick 2021 goals. So I think in 2 weeks, we're just going to have a show where we talk about what our collecting goals will be in 2021. But we can talk about it real quick before we sign off here. What reading goals do you have for 2021? So obviously, we have this awesome poll where people can vote and all that stuff. And we're just talking about how, things go up on that poll and nothing won. So what are some things you'd like to read in 2021 on Modern Men?
Ooh, that's tough, man. Because a lot of times there are so many things running through my head, I forget about them. But you know what I really want to read? It's about that'll line right up. The 4th, 2 weeks from now. I'm throwing my DC wild card out. We're reading Batman Year 1 on the 4th to start off the new year.
Oh, man. Wild card being thrown down. Batman on January 4th.
Yep.
So you said Year 1, right?
Yep, Year 1.
Dang.
In the year 2021.
There you go. So I know that's one of my favorites, Andy. And I was, before we went on air here, I was just name dropping DC and Vertigo titles for Andy to consider using his wild card. And I know for me, that is definitely one of my favorites. I always call it like one of the best Commissioner Gordon stories you're going to get. And then, of course, you get Batman's origin story. Sometimes just seeing Batman being portrayed as imperfect is an interesting story unto itself, because we're so used to him being like having no powers, but being portrayed as this perfect crime fighter who can do no wrong, who can make no mistakes in the field of battle. But I think you'll find that read super interesting, and especially if you like Born Again, because it's the same creative team. So yeah, I think that'll be right up your alley, Andy.
I'm looking forward to that. Like it's I feel like it's been a hot minute since we've read something Batman related. Actually, I'll peek at the list here again. It's been, yeah.
I'm trying to think of what the last one would have been.
10 weeks. Long Halloween, actually.
Yeah, Long Halloween. Yep, that was it.
It'd be 8-9 weeks. Either way, it's been a hot minute, and talking about some of the best, some of our favorite shows of the year, and talking about wild cards, and then I drew the DC wild card. It was like, well, yeah, Batman Year 1. Why not? Yeah, that same creative team as Born Again, like you said. This is gonna be good.
Yeah, and I know some other things, like I was trying to come up with a poll today, so also I'm glad you threw the wild card anyway. But one of the books I was really wanting to add to a poll at some point was Something is Killing the Children. I'm saving that for Modern Men episode. I'm purposely not reading it at all.
Ooh.
I've read just the first issue. I know nothing else about that book, but I keep hearing the hype and stuff behind it.
Yeah.
And I know you've been keeping up with that one, have you not?
I have. Yeah, it'll be interesting because a lot of the reading that we do on Modern Men, being as modern as it is, isn't quite topical week to week with new comic books coming out. That one will be pretty much in line because that's still an ongoing series. On issue 13 just came out, so it'll be pretty good.
Nice. Yeah, so I definitely want to read that. I wouldn't mind revisiting Die Again. Kieran Gillen, of course, Stephanie Hans. People love that book. But somewhere along the line, I just kind of fell off of it. So I want to revisit it to see if I have a new opinion on it, or maybe it'll reinvigorate my interest. But I liked it at first, but I just kind of lost interest after a minute.
Yeah, I had a hard time month to month with that book, and I
Yeah.
found myself having to reread frequently to get caught back up when a new issue would come out, because there's so much. It's a dense read, and if you're not caught up, I think it reads better as a trade. And I think John's Comics with Kids would fully agree that it's a better read as a trade.
Interesting.
So it'll be really cool to see how that goes from start to finish for the first trade.
And speaking of Gillen, at some point I want to make you guys somehow read Wicked and the Divine, another Kieran Gillen one. I think that's his best work still. I don't know if you've had a chance to read that at all.
I haven't. I'm holding out for the show. Like, I'm holding out. East of West is another one, and the monster.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think on that one, Jamie McKelvey is his partner, which I think he has some of the most underrated art in all of comic books.
Oh, wow.
So I definitely want to read that as well. Probably even throw in either Young Avengers Volume 2. Like there was the McKelvey and Kieran Gillen Volume 2, and then the Volume 1's worth reading too. You have Alan Heinberg basically came out of Hollywood just to write that story and create those characters. Jim Chung did the art on it. So 2 awesome volumes of books there. What were the other ones I was trying to throw in there? I still want to read all new Wolverine. Drew keeps name dropping that one, and I'm just trying to I almost thought I'd try and make a Wolverine episode and poll just to get that thrown in there somehow.
That'd be really good. Man, what else? Trying to think of what else I've been piling up every week.
Yeah. And you mentioned another good with East of West. I definitely need to give that a reread at some point. There's just too many to mention.
Descender, it was a fantastic read.
We never read Descender, did we?
We haven't done Descender yet. I've done Descender with a couple other people, but I don't think we've done it on here. Then there's Ascender that's going on right now too. Man.
Yeah, you could just go crazy with the Jeff Lemire stuff. Like, I would like to reread Animal Man by Jeff Lemire, his Swamp Thing run. I guess it was him and Scott Snyder's Swamp Thing run after a while, but it was mainly Scott Snyder's Swamp Thing. There's a lot of good gems in the New 52 that, not a lot of people talk about. I wouldn't even mind revisiting that Suicide Squad from the New 52 that I have not read, or Drew keeps on with this Tom Taylor Suicide Squad that's going on now. I definitely put that on my reading list at some point. But yeah, there's just a lot, I'm sure that we're going to have on polls and wild cards, and maybe even bring back the old randomizer at some point just for fun to see if we can get any of those to pass.
We're going to do a Last Ronin special for the show as well, I bet you, when that finishes up, because that's what, a 5-part series or 6-part?
Hopefully it's only 5, because I want to get this story. I want to get the whole story as soon as possible. It's the wait has been so long.
As long as they don't keep delaying it. Like, I don't remember when the first one even came out, but we were swiftly delayed into January for the second issue.
I think it's like January 29th. So we still got basically a whole other month from the recording of this episode.
Wow.
And I guess, in terms of kind of transitioning into our Turtle Tuesday show, I can't wait to revisit City at War, because that's where I pretty much started reading Turtles now, and that's around issue like 90, 92, something like that.
Okay.
And we're kind of on the cusp of getting to the halfway point of the whole Turtles run at this point.
I think we're only four trades away or so from City at War.
Yeah, because I think we crossed into the 50s in our last review of it, so we're probably going to get into the whole Trial of Krang stuff, I think is what it is, which I think runs up until issue 75, and then there's a few things after that. But yeah, we should be there in almost no time at the rate we're reading that. So I'm really looking forward to really diving into Turtles over there on my channel for sure. And then just a lot of great reads. And then I don't know if maybe we'll all read the Future State stuff and see if we feel strongly about those stories, and maybe just do a Future State special as well. I know Comic Core Chad's really looking forward to those books coming out, because he has actually not been waiting for Future State. So that's going to be make or break for his collecting, I guess. So
that's a hell of a wait.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. So, Andy, I think we've rambled on long enough. Where can people find ComicManAndy on the internet?
Ooh, you guys can find me here every Monday night on Modern Men, reading some of the most fantastic reads that you guys in the chat pick for us. and throwing some wild cards out here in Batman Year 1 in 2 weeks with my DC wild card. And then just go ahead and hit that giant @ symbol, however it's made, and look for ComicManAndy on any social media platforms. I even have a Twitter now, because Twitter, being what Twitter is got some hilarious stuff to find on there. And IG, and you guys can find me on the Pinkies Out podcast on Anchor FM. And you guys can also find me on my own channel, actually, ComicManAndy, where I'm having some fun over there and doing a massive giveaway right now for the holiday season. All you gotta do is find the video. It's the most recent one. Watch it, subscribe, and then leave a comment down below that's topical to the video.
You can find me. Just search cwoodard19 on YouTube, Instagram, Twitter. You'll be finding me on Turtle Talk Tuesdays. I may do a Tuesday night live stream here and there. Who knows? You got to turn on that gimmick button if you want to find out when I go live. One of my goals for 2021, I need to record some more content and get some edited stuff out there. So I might start doing more of that. And then also, I got contacted by my buddy Mike. We're going to record some Comics of the Atom this week. So we've kind of been taking it easy during the holidays as well. We're going to be visiting Monstrous. Marjorie used Monstrous. And then, yeah, we're going to be going through that slowly but surely. And then, of course, we're still gaming on the PS5, the Xbox One. We played some Red Dead Redemption last night with the Shield over here on the Comic Core. So, yeah, you guys can find me on all those avenues. So until next time, guys, big thanks for checking out the video. We'll catch you next time.